In today's episode, my guest is Matias, CEO and founder of PR Lab and author of the book, The PR Paradox, Mastering the Art of PR for Startups and Scale-Ups. Matias has many years of PR experience, from managing PR for IBM and Google in Argentina to founding his own PR agency in the heart of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. His agency, PR Lab, works with some of the fastest-growing tech startups and scale-ups in Europe, providing an integrated marketing approach, not only handling PR for their clients, but also branding services to align missions, visions, and values in order to create a compelling story that places these blossoming startups in a strong position in the saturated tech market. Rodsevich also founded the first PR community in the Netherlands, establishing a platform for marketing and communication professionals to share their knowledge, insights, and expertise with other professionals. Welcome to the PR Maven Podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I've been strengthening brands through PR for over 35 years, and now I'm celebrating the success of executives, influencers, business owners, and entrepreneurs from all around the world, all of whom have cultivated their brands and broadened their networks through traditional and digital networking methods. Each week, I interview one of these interesting and influential individuals and provide an opportunity for you, the PR Maven Nation, to gain insights from their strategies and stories. So stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. Matias, tell us about your career in public relations and how you got into it in the first place.
Sure thing. So I studied PR at uni. So that's kind of like I was always curious about, okay, what is this world really about, So when I was in the second year of uni, I started an internship in a PR agency, and I started working for a tech PR account for IBM, and then I worked in another agency for Google, and then I dive into the startup world, and the rest is history.
Well, when you say uni, I know what you're talking about, but not all of our listeners in PR Maven Nation.
Sorry.
That's university, right?
Correct. Yeah, sorry. That's like the hip language.
Yeah, right. Well, since I'm such a hipster, I know what you're talking about too. And weren't you lucky to start working with such big brands like IBM and Google? I mean, those aren't startups, right?
Indeed. It was actually very interesting because I went from, the kind of like traditional kind of like corporate world to like the startup setting. It's completely different, and I was overwhelmed, but I also really, really enjoyed both settings, completely different one from another.
Right. So what got you interested in startups, and why would a startup want to use PR to launch its brand?
Yeah, well, so I think the most interesting aspect of both worlds is that, there's a big difference between maintaining a reputation and creating one from scratch, right? So the latter requires more like an entrepreneurial approach, kind of like you need to chase journalists instead of being chased, right? And I really like that concept of, creating a brand, creating the brand attributes, and then picking the right journalists to communicate, that story to your audience. And it's just like the whole entrepreneurial approach was what really attracted me. But I reckon that there's a big difference between the two. And I prefer, to be honest, the second one because it's more agile and things move faster. You don't need to send an email and copy 20 people and wait 13 days to get a response. It's more like, if you're in a startup environment, it's more like, okay, shall we go for this? Great, let's do it. And then you just test. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, fine. I think the startup setting embraces the whole testing and failing and trying again, right? And that's something I really liked.
Yeah, I love what you said. It's the difference between chasing journalists instead of being chased. And that is so
Yeah.
true because a lot of established brands, get more PR requests than they can handle. So they're a lot of times
Yeah.
just sifting out which opportunities they want to take advantage of. Whereas when you're a startup, you take whatever you can get, right?
Indeed. And you build upon, right? But it was super funny because I went straight from Google to a company that was like to startup, like a very small startup with only 8 people. And at Google, it's a lot of like, okay, which journal, I mean, it's a lot about saying no to journalists, like they get so many requests that it's more like, okay, who should we say yes to? Whereas in this small startup, it's exactly what you just mentioned, as it's like anything you can get is perfect. So yeah, big
Exactly.
difference. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I worked for a ski resort earlier in my career, and I know that one thing we always tried to take care of the local journalists. Like, if somebody had a weekly newspaper that was close to the ski resort, we really tried to honor them because we knew that they would always be reporting on the ski resort as opposed to like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, which if you're lucky to get them to mention you once a year, you're very blessed. So I think
Yeah.
in addition to taking whatever you can get, I also think that every company should just really maintain a good relationship as much as possible with the local journalists.
I agree 100% with you. And I think it's also important to understand if maybe in your case of the ski resort, if getting coverage in the New York Times would have been something significant for you. You know what I mean? Like sometimes getting such type of coverage, maybe the business is not prepared, first of all, to receive that much like a tier outlet covering you. But also, I think in PR, it happens a lot that people like, especially founders or CEOs, they want to get featured in certain outlets because they saw another founder getting featured there. You know what I mean? But there's not really like a reason, like a concrete reason behind it. So I always ask these founders the question, like, why do you want to get featured at Forbes? Why do you want to get featured in like entrepreneur.com or like TechCrunch? Why don't you maybe consider a trade outlet? That may be speaking to your target audience, right? So yeah.
Yes, I'm glad you said the word target audience because it is really important to know your targeted audience and even develop personas around them or avatars. So when you're seeking out publicity coverage, you're going to the media outlets that would influence your target audience.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That is so true.
So, what is the long-term nature and long-term benefit of PR?
Oof, good question. Well, I always speak to these startups, that were just recently created. I always speak to them about the value of like long-term PR because ultimately what we're doing is we're creating a reputation. And a reputation is not creating from one day to another, but can be ruined in 5 minutes, right? So it's very important to take care of it and to think about it in the long run because ultimately I think the biggest value of PR is that you're building credibility, right? You're getting third parties to talk about you, to endorse you, to say how good your product or service is. And that's priceless, because you can spend as much money as you want in ads and in a fancy blog saying that your product is amazing and it's great and talking about all the features. But ultimately, as a user, I don't know if you do the same, Nancy, but I really take a look at reviews, right? I really take a look at articles mentioning a product that I'm about to buy, for example, before I do it. And that's the power of PR, that endorsement behind. And that reputation is not built from one day to another. Is the add up of those mentions and the add up of those that coverage that builds that perception and reputation in people's mind. Of course, lead generation is a big reason why a lot of people also tend to get into the PR world because they want to sell more. But the attribution is really hard to figure out, right? Because PR sits at the very top of the funnel, and then if you go lower, like in the funnel, that you see that that's part of the conversion, and it's hard to attribute it. So it's hard to measure. I'm not saying that it does not bring leads, but it's just hard to measure. But I do feel that building credibility is, in my opinion, like the biggest, let's say, benefit of a solid PR campaign.
Well, you say it's hard to measure, but if you do get a feature story in the New York Times, you know that it's valuable, and
Indeed, and 100%. And it's definitely, of course, it is possible to measure it. But, some marketeers, they have this like affinity to like numbers and like metrics. And sometimes the value of an article cannot be measured in instant reaction in public, because you can use an article in many ways, right? You can use an article to start a conversation with a prospect, for example, or to put in your newsletter, or to like build a discussion around, so the instant effect of an article is not all, right? There's more beyond that. That is the long added value of it, in my opinion.
Well, before the internet, we used to, if we got an article in the newspaper or a magazine, we would actually like photocopy it and send copies in the mail to everyone on our list. But actually, wow. I just did that this week with a client that got a really nice article in Inc. magazine. And I said to them, let's send a copy of this with a letter in the mail. And the reason that I suggested that is because I think it will really stand out, because people, people are used to getting emails that they just delete, and they don't really look at them. Yeah. And I thought that having a nice copy of this glossy color magazine article arrive in an envelope in the mail might be something that they would look at. So I do believe that it is important that if you get an article or a story on television or radio, that you do share it with your target audience, because ultimately they're the ones that you want to see it.
I'm definitely going to copy your posting, like the idea of sending by post the article. I love it. I think it's very nice. Yeah.
Well, I'm a big believer in sending things in the postal mail, just because, my whole life I've had pen pals all over the world. I just love writing and sending letters. I still, like right now, it's the holiday season, and I think my Christmas card list is like 250 people, just because I collect friends. I collect friends wherever I go, and then I'm like, oh, I'm going to send you a Christmas card. And then it's like, oh my gosh, it's taking so much time.
But I love that about you Americans, that you guys do that. I find it so nice, so sweet. The whole sending Christmas cards.
You don't do that? You don't do that?
No, unfortunately not.
Because I have relatives in Germany, and I send and receive cards with them. So I guess I thought it was something that was done in Europe.
Yeah, well, at least maybe not here in Amsterdam.
Right.
Maybe it really depends on where you are.
Yeah. You're too busy planting bulbs for the spring. Sorry, that was mean. I do love the flowers that you have there in Amsterdam.
They are cute, hey?
Yes, they're beautiful. So, what are the steps to developing your own PR strategies for your clients?
Well, we always say that there's we don't have a one size fits all type of strategy, because they all have different business goals behind trying to do PR. Like, for example, there's one client of ours that was really focused on their SEO, like search engine optimization efforts. So they really wanted to get backlinks in domains that had a really high authority. So we focus on achieving hyperlinks through coverage. There were others that were really wanted to from the noise and really start working on their positioning strategy and be seen as thought leaders. Some others want to sell more, or they want to launch something. So every one of them, they get their own kind of custom made strategy. But overall, there is some tactics that we normally tend to replicate. And we normally use what we call our PR model. PR Lab, that is an integration of thought leadership, brand awareness, and content creation efforts, all happening at once, because ultimately what we want to do is we want to create the news instead of waiting for the news to happen. So we want to move from a reactive approach to a proactive approach. And I think a lot of PR agencies or PR professionals, in a sense, they kind of wait for the news to happen to push them to the media. But if you're a startup, you don't have many things happening, So in a sense, you need to create those news, right? And that's what we try to do with them. It's just basically come up with certain PR stunts or certain tactics to create newsworthy assets, basically.
I'm sure it's a challenge getting the client to spend much time on a strategy because they're probably trying to get results as fast as possible, and they're probably working on nominal, they don't have a lot of money to spend. So I know when I have a new client, a lot of times they immediately want to jump to pitching stories to the media. And I'm like, well, we need to take a little bit of time to develop your messaging first and develop the strategy. So it's kind of a fine balance. I mean, how much time do you work with a client on the strategy before you actually start pitching?
Well, we try not to spend too much time because we have this kind of growth hacking approach to PR that relies on a lot of testing what works. And if it does, then we double down on, we replicate it. And if it doesn't, then we kill it, right? So we only spend the first week of the collaboration creating a strategy with proper content pillars, key messages. We analyze their competitors. We try to find gaps in the backlinks that they all have, try to identify opportunities for collaboration. We create an integrated PR and content calendar. And the second week of the collaboration, we are already pitching, mainly because of what you just said, Nancy. Sometimes clients get really impatient, right? And they want to start seeing results for you to earn that trust, right? So we try to not spend that much time in the initial phase of creating the strategy, but go more with an MVP and then test it and see what sticks and build upon, right? I'm saying that you need to understand also the nature of the business that we're in. Startups and scale-ups, they change their minds all the time. So they think that they want to do something, and then 2 weeks later, oh, actually, we changed directions, or we're out of business. It's so unstable, and that we need to be flexible in order to deliver good results to them.
I know. And sometimes I'll have clients that come in and they want to go all out with a PR campaign. And then when they really start thinking about how much it's going to cost, then they're like, sorry, I changed my mind. And in the meantime, I've spent all this time working with them. So,
I think that's a struggle that we face as PR professionals, Nancy, is the fact that a lot of our clients don't understand PR. So there's always an element of educating them how this works and telling them look, this takes time. We rely on third parties. There is something called editorial calendars that we cannot control, right?
Exactly. Oh, I know. Yeah. So do you do media training before a client talks with a journalist or goes on TV or radio?
Yeah, we always try to do that. Of course, ultimately, that depends on the client and their willingness to take it. Sometimes they ask for it. In my book, there is a whole chapter about media training because I consider it super important. Especially because you need to be prepared to, in a sense, dodge certain questions or keep the control of the discussion and the conversation that you're having. So I think media training is critical. And there are journalists that are really good at picking up on certain tactics, or certain words that you're using, buzzwords and so on. So we need to be prepared. It's a tough crowd, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And sometimes journalists will try to get you to think that they're your friend and they're so nice. And, then all of a sudden they come in and try to get you, when you're off guard. So that has happened to me before.
Yeah, and I think one of the common mistakes that I see is underestimating a journalist. I mean, it's so easy to find information about your past as a company on Google. And it's so easy to also quote it in an interview, oh, your competitor said this about you, or we found this on the internet about you. That's something that you might be completely unprepared. So I think, in my opinion, the benefits of having a solid media training in place, that it gives you the tools to gain that confidence and also to get yourself out of difficult or uncomfortable situations. So questions basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And I have a client that just did a TV interview this week and she held off on giving her key message because she thought the interview was going to last a lot longer. And then all of a sudden the interview was over and she really hadn't delivered exactly what she wanted to say. And she was like, can we do this over? And it's like, no, sorry. You missed your opportunity. So.
Oh, what a shame. That's a shame.
Yeah, that was a shame.
It's also learning. Next time, she's gonna be like so prepared to just drop the key messages.
Exactly. I know. Yeah. So that's another thing that I do with clients is I try to start with smaller media outlets, so that they can kind of practice before they get to the bigger audiences, basically. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's another technique I've learned. So, speaking of media, how do you pitch the media and build long-term relationships with them?
Well, I think the number one thing about pitching the media is always keep in mind that you need to add value. It's so important to also be empathetic, right? To put yourself in the shoes of a journalist and be like, does this story really matter? Right? Like, is it adding value somehow? Am I talking about the bigger space or the bigger story, or am I only focused on my product and my services? I think that's the creed that we have, at least at PR Lab, when it comes to pitching the media, right? And then also, I think a common misconception in PR is that a lot of people think that in order to reach out to a journalist, you need to have news happening or something newsworthy happening like internally. And what we try to do is we just try to provide value, even if it's not related to what we're doing, right? So if we see an interesting article or like an interesting piece of research that we think is worth sharing, or if we hear from someone in our field or in a certain field that the journalist covers that is doing something great, we just share it as a heads up, as well as we're always trying to collect data, because I think ultimately journalists really like that when you provide them with fresh insights. So we're always conducting little surveys through our newsletter, for example, to just like start a conversation with them and just keep in touch. So I think that's how we at least try to build relationships with journalists, based on adding value and giving rather than always taking.
Yeah. And actually, when you say stay in touch, I mean, I really try to look at journalists as people, and that you want to have a relationship.
Yes.
So you want to get to know them. And do they have pets? Do they have children? What kind of sports do they like to watch on TV? What do they do in their free time? And, I really make it my mission to know them as people first. And and also, sometimes, like you said, you don't want to just be pitching them all the time. You might want to just have a conversation and mention something about another company that isn't even your client.
Indeed. And then you add them on LinkedIn, I'm sure.
We were joking. I don't think that was part of the podcast today, but we were joking that I'm like obsessive about adding people on LinkedIn as soon as I meet them. And I have two sons who are probably about the same age as Matias, and I'll meet one of their friends and I'm like, oh, I'm going to link with you on LinkedIn. And my kids are like, Ma, could you please just stop it? I'm like, no, I can't. Sorry. I'll stop it when I die. But I'm alive right now, so I am going to link with you.
There's no shame in doing that.
No, I was born for LinkedIn. I always do say, actually, social media was invented just for me. So I can do social media, especially during the pandemic. I can socialize all the time on social media, even if I'm not with people. So.
Right. That's so funny.
I'm a social butterfly for sure.
Well, you're cut out for the job, that's for sure.
Thank you. Yes, I believe I was born for PR. It was bound to happen at some point. Luckily, my father, who's been gone now for quite a long time, but he's the one when I was about 17, he said, I think public relations is the career for you. And he was right. So I was glad for that. Yeah, he knew.
Well, that's very advanced, because like my parents still don't know what I do. Like they still think it's right. It's like something related to advertising or like marketing.
You're right. No, I know a lot of people don't understand the difference. Actually, we have an article on our website at Marshall PR about the difference between advertising and public relations, and it's always the most popular page on our website. We're looking at Google Analytics, because I think a lot of students might be writing papers for school, and they use that article for their papers.
That makes sense. Well, I'm going to start sharing it with some of my clients.
Okay, good. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's why public relations is more valuable than advertising.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Well, we're going to continue our conversation shortly, but first I want to tell everyone in PR Maven Nation about my new book, Grow Your Audience, Grow Your Brand, which is now available as an Audible edition on Amazon.com. And I recorded it myself here at the Portland Pod, where where we are today. And you can go to Amazon.com and you can search for Grow Your Audience, Grow Your Brand, and get either a print edition, a Kindle edition, or an Audible edition. Matias, do you have an Audible edition of your book?
No, I'm jealous.
Yeah, right. We'll have to work on that.
It's funny, Nancy, because I really thought that there was like a tool that you could get for that. But no, you need to actually hire a person to read your book, right?
Or you can read it yourself. That's what I did. I read it myself. I'm good at reading and I'm good at talking, so why not?
No, I really admire that. I don't have the patience.
Well, we'll be back with a little more laughter, a little more fun, and a little more talk about PR in just a moment.
Do you want to grow your client or customer base? Perhaps increase brand awareness? Maybe tell your unique story more effectively? Of course you do. But you may be worried that you don't have enough expertise to make that happen. Well, no worries, PR Maven Nation. Let the PR Maven herself, Nancy Marshall, show you how easy it is to get your message across effectively using a powerful yet simple tool, a message map. Nancy's training is often called informative and constructive, well-designed and impactful, with a perfect blend of theory and real-life experience. You will leverage Nancy's expertise to create your own message map when you register for this comprehensive online video training course, which is broken down into 4 easy-to-understand modules. Normally, this course is priced at $147, but for listeners of the PR Maven podcast, that's you, PR Maven Nation, it's only $29 when you enter the code word podcast during enrollment. It even includes a workbook and bonus content to guide you through the process. So go to prmaven.com and click on the Message Map Mastery course to enroll today. Remember, enter the word podcast during enrollment for a special discounted price of $29.
Welcome back, and today we're talking with my new best friend, Matias Rodsevich, who's the CEO and founder of PR Lab, and we're going to dive back in with more questions, and then we're going to figure out how we can get together and meet somewhere between Maine and Amsterdam.
And break all these Corona rules.
Yeah, right. Oh, gosh. We'll have to meet in the middle of the ocean somewhere with our masks on. I'm a good swimmer, though. I could swim over.
Well, we can both go halfway,
Yeah, right, exactly. So, Matias, what are some of your media training tips?
Well, I think basically I try to turn key messages into sound bites. I think sound bites are very important, and there are plenty of types of sound bites, like like the 3 key bullet points, right, or like the analogies, etc., to make the key messages more, let's say, noticeable, and also to create what we call the quotables quote, right? Because we want those key messages to eventually, be not be cut out from the interview or to show up in the article, right? And then another thing that I really emphasize on my media trainings is the bridging technique, how to actually take control of the conversation and bring it to what's important to you, right? So how to first, acknowledging the question, not ignoring it, but then also, in a sense, connecting it to what's relevant to you or to your brand values or to your, the main key aspects of your product or service, right? Among other things, But I'm curious about your media training as well, Nancy. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask questions.
Well, we actually use a technique called message mapping, where you create this visual map on a sheet of paper, and in the center you have the key message, which is 21 words long, or a 7-second soundbite, because to read off 21 words takes about 7 seconds. And then we have what we call supporting messages around that key message in the middle that all kind of feed back into that key message. So when we're doing media training, we train our client to try to stay on that message map and don't go off. So we train our clients to always, as you said, bridge or segue back to the key message, which you repeat over and over several times. And in that way, hopefully it's going to end up in the story. Oh, a big thing too is at the end of an interview, a journalist usually says, "So, Matias, is there anything you'd like to add?" And most people will say, "Oh, no, I think we've covered it all." But no, that's when you really should say that key message again. I just wanted to add that and then say that 7-second sound bite because that's a really good opportunity.
Oh, I love it. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll
I feel
send
very
you.
inspired now. I'm making notes.
Yeah, I actually have a course on message mapping that you could take. I'll send you a link to it.
Please.
Okay.
I will be happy to.
Okay,
Nice.
good.
I'm going to go back to my place of being the interviewee because you know what? I love interviewing people. I'm very curious. So I'm going to stick to my role.
We have a lot in common. I'm curious too. That's why I like this podcast. So what are the benefits of thought leadership?
Well, thought leadership right now, I see trending quite a lot. I think the biggest benefit of thought leadership is to, again, build that credibility around your brand, but also to stick out, right? Because a lot of founders, a lot of CEOs, a lot of representatives of companies, they normally remain within their certain little field of work, always talking about the same kind of products, same kind of services, same kind of features, especially in tech. But only a few dare to talk about their vision of where the industry is going, what's trending, what are the main struggles of a target audience. I think the biggest benefit of thought leadership is it enables you to connect with your potential leads of you from a non-commercial perspective, right? From a content approach kind of thing. Because you're talking more about what you have in common, what you see happening, and you're leveraging your position as a kind of key player to enable those conversations to happen and to build key partnerships or key conversations with people in your field that you might not from a commercial point of view. I don't know if that's clear.
Yes,
if that
I
makes
think,
sense.
I write a column for Forbes.com, and I recently wrote about the value of having someone say, oh, yes, I've heard of you. Like if somebody says that to you when you meet them, if they have already heard of you or they know your name, already you are so much farther along the path towards making a deal or making a sale or, accomplishing your goals than if you have to start by explaining who you are from absolutely no awareness level at all.
Exactly. I think that's the biggest value. And I think more and more brands are daring to do it. I think you tell me, Nancy, but I think a few years ago, a lot of people were not that big of a fan about it. But I think now brands are daring to take a place, to stand for a cause, to share their evolved kind of view or vision. And I think that's great for thought leadership.
Oh, absolutely. I always say that's a key to personal branding is to put your stake in the ground for what you believe in.
Indeed.
So how can you scale up your PR strategies as you scale up a business?
Well, when it comes to scaling a business, you can scale it in different ways, right? You can scale it because you want to get more customers or you want to get a bigger chunk of the market share, but you can also scale it by going across borders, for example. So there are also different ways of scaling your PR strategy. I think when it comes to scaling across borders, it's important to know each country is different. Like, for example, here in Europe, every country is different. And even though we might be a 2-hour drive away from Belgium, then the way you speak to journalists in Belgium is completely different to the way that you speak to journalists in the Netherlands or in Germany or in Sweden, not only because there are language barriers, but also because each media is more prone to cover certain types of stories or more skeptical about a certain story, right? So it's important to really understand who is that you're talking to and to speak their language, basically, and to pick the angles of your story that will resonate with them in those markets. Now, when it comes to scaling in your own market or in your own field, again, I think we all reach a point where only doing brand awareness is not enough. So that's why I always recommend also doing thought leadership, right? Because if you do only brand awareness, you might get, coverage, in certain times of the year. Like, let's say, for example, you're in the e-commerce field. Okay, Black Friday might be the best time for you, to get quite some nice coverage. But then eventually it's going to go low, right, in your analytics. So how to keep that momentum alive? And I think that's how it's important to also start, trying to add thought leadership tactics into your strategy to broaden the scope of your reach, right? And I think that's a way of scaling as well, right? As well as placing content, syndicating content in different outlets. and basically just staying relevant. I think that's also a way to scale, just to stay relevant, not just be relevant at one point in time, but to stay relevant. And I'm telling you, that's hard work, but I'm sure you know that, Nancy.
Yes, I know. You can't be a one-trick pony. It's like just because you did something newsworthy back in 1999 doesn't mean that you're still going to be relevant in 2021. So I know, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the reason why I started doing this podcast is I wanted to stay relevant and show that even after I've been in public relations for so many years, I can still adapt to new technologies and new techniques. And so podcasting has worked for me.
Oh, that's great to hear.
So what about crisis PR? That's a big thing for me and my agency too. What are your top tips for crisis PR?
Well, I'm a big fan of work-life balance. So it's not crisis PR. It's not something that I'm a big fan of because, that means late hours and weekends working. But I think there's a big difference that needs to be made between, because I think crisis PR now is trending. Everyone's talking about crisis PR. Well, there's a big difference that needs to be made. One is crisis PR, and another one is doing PR in times of crisis, right? And there are two different things. Because in a sense, you are, like, for example, let's say doing PR in times of Corona, most probably your brand is kind of like a victim, right? Whereas doing crisis PR means that most probably you are somehow the reason why the crisis is happening. So it's different kind of like set of actions and skills that you need. I think when it comes to doing PR in times of crisis, it is important to be very aware of what's happening in your surroundings and understanding how your messaging can affect your target audience, right? So like we had a few webinars, that's my thing. And when the coronavirus crisis started with some PR consultants about how to be relevant and add value to the conversation, right? Now, when it comes to crisis PR and maybe you doing something in a sense wrong or something that created like some sort of like, might have offended or affected people in a certain way, it is, in my opinion, very important to not only be prepared, for these kind of things that could happen, because if it could happen, most probably chances are that it will eventually happen, but also to acknowledge the situation and be human, right? I don't know if you agree with me, but certain crises, we see these crises that keep happening over and over again, and this spokesperson taking the same stand of like not being human, right? Not trying to understand the other party and just being really defensive. And I think that creates like that really backfires on you as a brand, right?
Yeah, I think people are more likely to forgive you if you just apologize and say, yes,
Indeed.
I did something wrong and I'm really sorry. And I'm sorry for those people that have been impacted. And then you can move on more quickly.
And also, besides just apologizing, because I saw that happening a lot with the Facebook scandal, At one point, I was just tired of seeing like Mark Zuckerberg or like Sheryl Sandberg just apologizing, but not doing anything. So you need to apologize, but to also show with your actions that you're sorry and that you're doing something to change it. Right?
Absolutely.
That's at least what I think, because at one point people get tired of just like apologies and nothing changing. So, yeah.
I agree. So, Matias, this has been so fantastic. If people want to follow up or if they want to purchase your book, how can they do that?
Well, my book is available on Amazon, on Google Books, Google Play, Apple Books, many stores, Kobo, Kindle, etc. So they can just buy there. I unfortunately don't have the audio version yet, like you do, Nancy. So I'm going to ask you for some tips. And they can also just connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, like I just did today.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So please do so. I'm also a lot on LinkedIn like Nancy. So please feel free to connect with me.
All right. Well, this has been so awesome. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that we can stay in touch. And maybe someday when all this pandemic is out of the air, we can connect in person.
Me too. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. And yes, I promise I'm going to go visit you in the US.
Okay. I look forward to it. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode. I'd like to thank you for listening. And if you feel that you've gotten value out of today's conversation, consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever app you're using to tune in. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should do so. I release a new episode each week, and subscribing will make sure you get an alert when there's a new episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation by going to prmaven.com/nation and clicking join. It's free, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you have an Alexa-enabled device, be sure to add the PR Maven Marketing Minute to your daily flash briefing menu. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.